We're about to run to my car and grab some resistance bands because we've been sitting in the office. So I've always got them in my bag, and then we're gonna go back inside upstairs to the office and share a couple of moves with you guys. I'm gonna get a quick little workout in, something quick and easy just to kind of get my blood pumping and wake me back up. You ready? Let's go. Worst time of year to be inside? No! I took them out of my bag. Shoot, I've got one band in here. That's right, we'll make it work. We just need one band. This is perfect. This is a perfect opportunity to show you that you don't need a whole lot to do a workout and for it to be effective. So for whatever reason, I decided to take all of my bands out to put a shirt and a pair of pants in the bag that I don't even need. So this was the only guy that got left behind, but I'm gonna show you all how to make this work. All right, so Kelvin said, whenever I'm ready, we can just start this party. I'm gonna use the bands first to do a couple of little dynamic movements to sort of just loosen everything up. A lot of people who sit down all day for work have issues with their low back. A lot of times that has to do with the fact that their glutes and their hamstrings aren't activated throughout the course of the day, so their back starts to take on a lot of the stress that their glutes and their hamstrings should be taking on. So what I'm gonna do just to make sure that those guys are awake, and anybody who's ever working out, period, you should always activate your glutes and your hamstrings. Doesn't matter, even if you're doing an upper body workout, you should always activate your glutes and your hamstrings. So I'm gonna do an exercise here that activates a lot of my posterior chain. It's gonna get my hamstrings and my glutes activated. Super simple, so what I would do is I'd loop the band underneath my foot. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a little bit of a lunge just to kind of get everything moving. So I'm gonna lunge, I'm gonna drive up through that planted leg, and then I'm gonna do a little bit of a kickback. Kickback is a great way to activate your glutes. People always ask, how do I work my glutes? How do I work my glutes? The best way to work your glutes is to do movements that require hip extension. So going from a bent or a flexed hip position to a straight or extended hip position. And focus on squeezing your glutes when you do that. That's the best way to target your glutes. So again, just to kind of get things moving, I'm gonna do that reverse lunge. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to a kickback, really focus on that extension. So I'm thinking about activating my hamstrings and my glutes, kick straight back, squeeze the glute, and then back to that position, drop that foot. Same thing, drop it forward, squeeze the glute, and back. So I can just do 5 or 10 of those. Once I did 5 or 10, do the same thing on the other side. Another really simple one to activate the hamstrings would be as such. So I would sit down, hand around both feet, lay on my belly here. I'm just thinking about doing a little hamstring curl. Now the big thing when you're doing your hamstring curls, focus on pointing that toe up. Notice how I'm not trying to point my toe down, I'm trying to point my toe up. For me personally, that always gets my hamstrings a little more activated than the other way. So I just do a couple of those guys on each side, 5 or 10, wake those hamstrings up. Really important one, again, talking about general wellness, but also in terms of health and longevity. So talked about the importance of the hamstrings and the glutes and how that can kind of alleviate a little bit of that low back pain a lot of us get. Another thing that's really important is to open up the hips. So we've talked about that extension, right? But one of the things that a lot of times is also compounded when we sit for extended periods of time at work, at school, in the car, traveling, whatever, is you get what you call front side shortening. So the muscles that are responsible for flexing the hip, right, bringing that hip into this flexed position, when they're constantly in that flexed position, they become tight and they become shortened in that position. So what happens is when you do go to stand up or to do something that requires that hip extension for you to open that hip up, now you also have to combat the tightness of that hip on the front side, as well as probably fight the inactivation and the weakness that you have in the glutes and the hamstrings from not using them very much because you've been sitting, so they haven't really had to do their job. So one thing we can do to complement activating the glutes and activating the hamstrings is to open up the hip flexors and do a little bit of dynamic stretching for those guys. And this one doesn't require anything at all except for your body. Just take a knee, you focus on squeezing the glute and pushing your hip forward at a 45-degree angle. So squeezing whichever cheek is on that back side with that lunge position here, and I'm just thinking about squeezing my glute. That's the only thing that's pushing my hip forward. I'm not thinking about leaning forward. I'm not thinking about pushing my body forward. The only thing I'm doing is squeezing my butt and forcing that hip forward through that action. So I squeeze, and that naturally extends my hip and pushes it forward. So I squeeze, relax, do about 10 of those. Flip it over to the other side, same thing, squeeze, relax, squeeze. What a lot of people want to do, especially people who have tight hips or who have inactive glutes and hamstrings, is when they try to do something like that. They try to do, let's say, a deadlift or a squat or something that involves that act of going from hip flexion to hip extension, is because of the tightness that they're fighting and because of the inactivation and the lack of ability they have to fire these muscles that are really responsible for creating that movement, is they end up utilizing their back a little bit more, and they compensate by trying to hyperextend the back. They try to use their back to pull themselves up into that extended position. And as we all know, that's a big no-no, especially if you're lifting a significant amount of weight. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a significant amount of weight. The point is we don't want to do that. This part of your spine, your lower spine, your lumbar spine, is considered a stable joint, meaning it's not supposed to move very much. It's supposed to stay pretty rigid in its structure and in its position. The parts of your spine that you do want to move are your thoracic spine, so that middle section, stuff like that. So again, when we take all those things into consideration, trying to get the glutes activated so that they can do their job, trying to stretch those hips out so that they're not tight and not fighting against us to just add to the difficulty, we also want to make sure that we're not using our low back and hyperextending, because that's where we put those discs and everything in a vulnerable position. So another one a lot of people deal with is lower trap weakness. Because of the fact that we sit hunched forward at our desks all day, doing this kind of thing, or on our phones, our lower traps, just like our glutes, kind of turn off. They don't utilize very much. So the fact that we want to get upright and strengthen those muscles is what we're going to do with this. We want to try to get those, again, activate them, but you can also work them. So one thing you can do, it's very simple, call these no monies. These are great for your external rotators. So what you do, take the band right around your wrist, palms up, and you're thinking about getting those shoulder blades tight behind you, so you roll the shoulders back. They call it putting your shoulder blades in your back pockets. Roll the shoulders back, make sure you're squeezing them together just slightly. And I'm just taking that band and I'm just pulling it apart. I'm thinking about trying to keep my elbows pinned in against my torso. Just open those hands up. You can do 10, 15 of those guys, just nice and controlled both directions. And what you'll feel, you start to feel those shoulders burn real bad. You start to feel those external rotators, some of that stuff in your rotator cuff start to fire up. And then in between those shoulder blades, towards the middle and the lower part of it, you'll start to feel those guys fire up too. So what we're doing is we're getting all that stuff that's been allowed to be lazy because we're shortening it. We're not using all that stuff. We're lengthening all that out. It's kind of relaxed. We're doing our stuff. We're waking all that stuff up, because at the end of the day, posture, body position is also one of those things that contributes, poor position I should say, contributes to that domino effect of all those compensations and that tightness that travels through the body. So trying to make sure that those muscles that are responsible for good posture are also activated and able to do their job. Make sure that you follow us at shedyourfat.com. Like I said, follow us on IG at shedfat, at workout routine. Guys, if you ever have questions about anything, whether it's educational information, whether it's about the services that we can provide for you, if it's about something that we can't necessarily help you with, but we might be able to link you up with the right individual who can help you with, please reach out to us, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to accomplish is having a positive effect on as many lives as we possibly can.